One of the many challenges for NGOs in the Caribbean has been a lack of legal recognition. The sector has only been partly regulated for a long time. NGOs often face financial difficulties and are heavily dependent on external funding, making it difficult to sustain themselves. The legislation in many Caribbean territories does not fully recognize the generation of revenue for a public benefit as distinct from a company established for profits. NGOs also face financial burdens from taxes and duties on most goods and services required to effectively undertake their work. All these constraints limit the potential impact of services undertaken by NGOs. Although society continues to benefit tremendously from the work of NGOs, the sector is still viewed with a degree of suspicion. Legislation enhances the validity of NGOs, boosting their representations and improving their reputations. Here are some other benefits of NGO legislation. 1. It facilitates a greater level of organization and coordination, strengthening the internal governance processes. 2. It builds a greater sense of trust between the NGOs and the publics they serve. 3. The enabling environment facilitated through legislation creates opportunity for NGOs to expand their services. 4. It increases public confidence, the potential to attract volunteers, financial resources, and the support of the private sector. 5. It deepens the relationships among NGOs in the sector and establishes closer working relationships with the public sector. Only 2 countries within the Caribbean have enacted NGO-specific legislation: Belize and St. Christopher and Nevis. The Caribbean Policy Development Center, CPDC, has undertaken specific research on NGO model legislation. This research includes examining existing frameworks across the region and identifying key elements required towards drafting an inclusive NGO Act for the Caribbean. NGOs need legislation not just at the national level, but also at the regional level to increase their chances of success. The CPDC's efforts also include national consultations on harmonizing NGO legislation across the region. The outputs from these consultations, along with research on existing legislation, have led to key policy documents which are currently being used to guide the development of model legislation. For more information or questions about CPDC's NGO legislation efforts, visit www.cpdcngo.org.